All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to a new CDH focused podcast. I'm ASM, and I have two folks here. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to a new CDH focused podcast. I'm ASM, and I have two folks here with me, Wedge, who is not from the Manosaurus, and Two Hand Touch. And we'll three of us try to go over several topics, maybe about once a month, and hopefully we'll have fun and you guys will have fun.
Hi, everyone.
Let's go over just a brief overview of the topics we'll be going over today. So the first thing is going to be an introduction. The second one is going to be, we're going to be going over a review of the meta of what's going on, specifically in the cockatrice world and just kind of like within the CEDH Discord as a whole. And we'll be going over a little brief overview of a few of the Battle Bond cards, just a few of the most notable ones that we think are CEDH playable and some that we think are kind of traps. And our last topic for the day is we're going to be covering partners, how they've affected the meta, what we personally think about them. So I guess let's just start off with a brief introduction about each of us. As we just said, my name's Wedge. I've been playing CEDH since, I want to say 2016-ish, but really more realistically playing like true CEDH since like 2017. I started off playing off like cute fringe bear decks, like starting off like a Carador Boomweaver style deck, and then eventually moving into Kestorm and Razaketh Reanimator or Razakats. And I am a moderator on the CEDH Discord. Spoiler alert, all three of us are. Check out the Discord. It's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and ASM, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Some of you guys may have heard of me before because I've been featured on Fossils podcast a couple times. Yeah, I'm a mod on the CDH Discord and a mentor on the CDH subreddit. So I usually play Storm nowadays, mostly Zur and Jace. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Two Hand Touch. I also am a mod and a mentor, and I started playing CEDH right around the time of the Mulligan change. So I don't remember when that was, I guess 2015 or 2016. At that time, I was brewing Rurik Thar, and then I moved on and did some stuff with Tazri before the Food Chain Tazri deck came out. And ASM and I brewed Selvala, the Bro Storm deck that some of you, or most of you, I'm sure, have seen. And now I'm just sort of playing around in four-color land. I guess I should also mention that all three of us are in the same paper group, even if we don't meet as frequently as we would like. So we kind of have a little bit of a window into the online meta, and then also like a more realistic paper meta.
Yep.
So hopefully we can provide some perspective from that point. And I should also add, just as a disclaimer, that obviously none of us are pro Magic players and none of us are pro podcasters. So please be patient with us as we work through the growing pains. But I think we can actually provide something that might be useful and entertaining. So we'll see how it goes.
Absolutely.
Sounds good. All right, let's move on to our meta review. So kind of this section, we just want to talk about a few decks. We're not going to cover the whole meta. That would be very exhaustive. But we'd just like to talk about a few decks, some of the new decks. We'll talk about things that we feel are trending up, things that we feel are trending down, and things that we feel are pretty steady presences in CDH for a long time. So why don't we start off with the new decks, because let's start off with something interesting. So some of the new kids on the block that I've definitely the new Jwara from Dominaria.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you guys think? I haven't seen too many people brewing it. Maybe like rather, I've seen a lot of people brewing it, but I haven't seen too many lists.
Yeah, so there's been a couple lists that I've seen around. They have a couple different variations. Where like one of the first iterations was like, oh, let's brew Cheerios. That's not very strong. And then there's somewhere like, let's try to brew something that's more focused on a kind of a stormy side. And those have been pretty decent. And then the most like prominent one that I've seen that's been making the most headway has been Bolshevictory's list, along with a few other people who have been working with him. And it's a kind of like a mid-range it's like a mid-range list that can go off at like any point. That also packs like very broad and powerful like artifact stacks pieces like Grafdigger's Cage, Curse Totem, Silent Gravestone, whatever. But while also packing all of the fast mana rocks and such like that, to where you can just kind of go off through a Hurkyl's Recall type effect, such as like Retract, Rebuild, Hurkyl's Chain of Vapor, Paradoxical Outcome, to just essentially make mana positive draw engines that just essentially lead off into like a big old Aetherflux Reservoir or a Walking Ballista.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting take on the deck because there's not exactly many decks that kind of fill that role of being heavy stacks and also able to go off quickly. There are a few notable ones, but I do agree that the Cheerios line is sort of a trap. I tried brewing the eggs build myself, and it always you either run out of gas before when you're trying to rush out a Jwara, or you're holding all this crap in your hand.
Yeah,
waiting for Drawer to land.
So I think the original billing of Jwara was like SRAM 2.0, right? But I think most of us have seen enough SRAM to recognize the inherent weaknesses.
Yes.
Obviously, you're stuck in one color. In this case, you're in two colors that are a lot better, but you're still in two color. So if you're going to pin yourself into a deck that is so dependent on your commander, and you're filling it with cards that are really low quality on their own, it's going to be a problem more often than not. So, and I think that's what I've seen of the Cheerios versions is that when they go great, but as soon as your commander hits a Gilded Drake or a Pongify or whatever, it's sad times.
You're sitting in the dirt.
Yeah,
definitely.
And that's where I think like that list that the one that Bolshevictory and the people from the Jora Discord have been brewing, it doesn't need Jora to win. It just really, really, really helps it out. And being able to play those stacks pieces allows you to kind of play at a slower speed because your deck doesn't really go until you have your commander in play, to actually like get all that like parity breaking and stuff like that.
So Wedge.
Yeah, and it's pretty neat that your stacks pieces actually replace themselves when you have a drawer out.
What sort of speed do you think that deck has? I'm talking about the sort of stacksy combo with a stormy finish. Do you think that's like a turn 4 deck, turn 5 deck?
I think it's probably more on the turn 5 end. Obviously you want to try and get Jora out like turn like 2 or 3 ideally. But like that's not going to happen every game. There are times when you're going to have to kind of play out, try to play your stacks pieces early, that type of thing. I think it's a deck that's definitely more on a slightly slower side, and that it's definitely okay. That it's definitely more comfortable to play into a grindy matchup rather than trying to race.
And how much counter magic do you think that deck is packing?
I think it's packing all the basic ones. I mean, if it's not, as far as I'm aware, I think the deck should be running, Force of Will, Counterspell, Delay, Mental Misstep, Flusterstorm.
Yeah, pretty much like the standard blue suite.
So
yeah, like the standard blue suite.
Talking about 10-ish.
Yeah, I would say about 10-ish or so, but it's also running bounce spells as well too, Chain of Vapor and such, which also doubles as a like a paradoxical outcome of its own if Jor is in play, which is pretty sweet. I think that's kind of like, for me, that's what I see as like the biggest allure for like the Jor list is you get to pretty much play like a deck with 4 paradoxical outcomes, up to 4 paradoxical outcomes in the deck. and then like your paradox, and then your regular paradoxical outcome is like a super ad nauseum where you're making like mana positive and you're drawing twice the number of cards because you're recasting all of your rocks. At least that's what I see. That seems like really fun about it, and why it's kind of like a very kind of big flavor of the month type of thing. Because it looks fun to play.
Yeah, I haven't actually played against the deck, so I don't really have much more thoughts about it. But hope that it's maybe it'll be a mainstay. Maybe it won't be. We'll see.
Yeah, I haven't really seen it much in ranked, and I would like to see it more in the games on the ranked games on Cockatrice. But yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, maybe since you mentioned ranked, could you just give a real quick snapshot of what do you mean when you say ranked? What is that?
Yeah, so recently on the CDH Discord, ASM created this bot called Asperia, where it is a point keeping / ranking system for Cockatrice games. We have 3 different channels in CDH Discord called LFG Open, where you can just play unranked games, just a way for people to meet up and play CDH games on Cockatrice. LFG Ranked, which like it tracks your personal like win loss percentages, and actually gives you points tallied up based on who you go up against, and actually has a ranking. And then we have a LFG Gauntlet, which is like an environment where like if you want to play a deck against like what is considered like established decks in CDH, that's like a kind of environment for you to kind of play. That way you don't play against like random spice brews that are very fringe, but you want to like see like, I want to see how this new deck that I'm building fares against super common decks like Teferi or Thrasios Timna. Or
I think Gauntlet you can only really play established decks. So
okay.
It's just established. It's just it's kind of like you want to play established decks against other established decks, but you don't want to play ranked, which is potentially a little bit more open to other people playing things.
Okay.
But I think it was sort of focused at newcomers that want to get familiar with the format, and but don't want to get into open and don't want to quite get into ranked.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we can circle back on the topic later. I just wanted to put that out there. So the other new flavor of the month, it's getting a little bit old, but Godo. So there's a newish Godo build based on the Dominaria card Helm of the Hosts. I don't know. Have you guys had much experience playing with or against the newest Godo builds?
I've only watched games with Godo in them, but I get the general gist of it. It's cast Godo, make a bunch of get Helm of the Host put into play, suit it up with Helm of the Host, and create infinite combat steps with infinite Godo tokens, and win that way.
Yep.
So like,
I haven't actually played against it either. I've only watched. I've spectated games where it's been played. But yeah, it's kind of like Sidisi, the mono black one, Sidisi 2.0.
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of it.
Although, yeah, it's like it's mono red, so you don't really have many ways to refill your hand. And after your combo is essentially 11 mana, since you need to play Godo for 6, and he'll fetch out your Helm, and then you have to equip Helm for 5. And there's a few ways in the deck to cheapen the combo, which are those are effectively rituals because they just help you cheat the equip cost.
Yep.
But because it's very similar to Sidisi, it also has a lot of the same weaknesses in which once you expend your hand trying to cast Godo and do the whole thing, like your hand is empty and it's very hard to go off again because you've just expended pretty much your entire hand, and a lot of your mana isn't always permanent based. So
yeah, it's usually
it can be hard to rebuild that mana.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because it is essentially a 0 card combo, right? You always have access to your commander, and your commander can always fetch out hosts. So from a consistency standpoint, it's probably in the top, right? But then, as you mentioned, kind of from a resource burden standpoint, 11 mana is way above the typical combo cost. I mean, for CEDH in today's meta, you're generally going from like 2 to 4 or 2 to 5 for your total mana burden for a 2-card combo, or a 1-card combo, right? From Flash on the low end up to
Ad
things
nauseum.
like Ad Nause or like Buried Alive plus Animate Dead or something like that.
So you're going for like nearly more than double that kind of average threshold.
Right. So
yeah, but what you get in return for that cost is that you don't have to tutor anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
well, you don't have. I mean, Godo tutors, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. So what I've seen is the density of mana rocks and rituals and mana sources is like 2 times or more, than any other deck. You're basically just packing every rock and ritual into your 99 to try to accelerate that 11 mana threshold.
Requirement.
So
it's exactly like CDC in that respect.
It does have a couple kind of haymaker cards. The other interesting thing that I've seen from that deck is that you can actually break parity on Possibility Storm. So if you can find a way to just rush out Possibility Storm, that effect actually, I don't think it triggers on your commander. It's only cards that you cast from hand.
Yep.
So once you cast your commander, you don't need to cast any spells from hand. You can just proceed to victory while other people are struggling to really do anything effective. The other kind of interesting aspect is you do have access to Treasonous Ogre, which is a powerful card that, because of its colors and its cost, doesn't really see as much play as it probably should, or it just doesn't really have the perfect application. But that gives you another sort of 1-card combo where if you can do something like turn 1 Soul Ring, turn 2 Treasonous Ogre, you just win unless you get interacted with, because you can just access 11 mana really fast.
Actually, 3 and you got 11 mana.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, Treasonous Ogre at 40 life gives you 13 mana total.
Yeah, exactly. So it's got some interesting angles that it can play, as well as the Blood Moon effects and Ruination. It's got a couple ways to recover the combo. Usually, like the lands that can bring an artifact back, or
I think that's just Buried Ruined and then Transfer Treasure and Goblin
Welder.
I think those are the 3 main recursion pieces.
But yeah, I mean, again, if you there's not many ways to protect yourself from just getting either your original Godo zapped or a Helm of the Host in response to an activation. So
yeah, people really have to respect Godo, like in terms of if they cast Godo, you need to have removal or counter Godo. Like as long as that goes, then Godo has a hard time winning after that the first time. But if you ignore it, he will win the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a legit turn 3 3-point something deck in terms of average Goldfish. So it's probably a CDH deck, and I guess time will tell if it really hangs around as kind of one of the premier sort of fast combo options.
Yeah. Like one thing I want to kind of point out is like just kind of positives and negatives towards Godo is like, one of the positives is that it's one of the few fast combo decks that where it gets under, or not really, but kind of gets under rule of law effects. I mean, you need to play rituals to be able to get the combo out, but when you're on like the slower grind, it can play under those by just, casting Godo and having 5 other mana open.
You pretty much just play ramp every turn, and then once you get to like rocks, and then once you can play Godo and equip, then you can just win without having to cast anything.
So that's like one positive, and it's pretty much immune to graveyard hate because there's nothing in the graveyard it needs to do. So like those are like 2 of the most prominent kind of stacks pieces that are like out in the meta. But on the same token, though, is that like Godo is severely weak to obviously Null Rod, and as well as any type of instant speed removal of artifact or creature type. So like that's kind of like, while like as opposed to something like CDC, CDC's not so much. CDC doesn't care about that kind of stuff.
CDC does care about creature removal. You can kill CDC in response to the exploit trigger, and you won't be able to sack anything.
Did not know that. Yeah. So, so I guess let's move on from Godo. Let's talk about some decks that have just kind of been overall like not doing too well, or just kind of like not really not doing too well, but just not having as much of a representation online, as well as just what we've seen in general.
Yeah, and
I will say that one thing about ranked is that people bring decks that I think are going to win.
right. And I just wanted to add real quick, Sam. This is just our snapshot into the world that we see. Obviously, our goal is not to say that like any particular deck is not necessarily viable. We may say things like that at some point, but we always want to come from the standpoint of CEDH decks are meta dependent.
Absolutely.
So we're looking at our meta that we see, and when we talk about decks that are trending up or trending down, it's just it's in our online cockatrice meta and it's in our paper meta, but there may be places where these decks are thriving.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I only have insight into what I see, and unfortunately, we don't have very large and widespread tournaments that give us a sort of a wide overview of the global meta. But I mean, not global meta, but like the global local metas.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what we seem to see, and I don't necessarily think it's I don't necessarily think it's accurate everywhere or it's true everywhere. But I think a lot of I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of playgroups have had similar general experiences, although some things may be different.
Yeah. So like one thing I like getting to these decks are kind of trending down. I kind of want to like preface this. This is something that I've personally noticed since honestly partners were introduced. And we'll get more into partners later. But like these kind of decks that we've seen that have been kind of going down I think are as a direct result of a huge shift in meta change from the release of partners and Hulk being unbanned. Like really shaking up the meta and forcing everything to be much more interactive. And the decks that we've noticed that are kind of trending down are those kind of glass cannon decks that were just talking about before, like Black Sidisi, Grenzo, Arkham, and even Selvala, which I mean, it's actually I've been seeing a little bit more Selvala, but it did have a huge dry spell for quite a while.
I do think they still have game because you will always get random free wins just by being fast.
Absolutely.
But I do think that that's like people just play more interactive decks now, like in general, at least on ranked and where we play in paper. Like there used to be a bit of a trade off between being fast and being interactive, but with the unbanning of Hulk, and not even just the unbanning of Hulk, but there's actually several other like Razaketh is like reasonably fast, but I don't know if it's a direct effect of the partners or a combination of both things, but it's no longer a requirement to be fast or interactive. You can be both in pretty much every color combination that you want to be in. I mean, aside from monocolor, your options are a little more limited.
Right.
Yeah.
I
agree with everything you just said. I think, but except I do think it is in large part due just to the unbanning of Hulk. I mean that gave such a fast goldfish to certain four color decks that you're sort of when you're brewing now, you're sort of thinking either am I going to be a fast Hulk deck or am I going to find a way to combat that? And any deck that isn't going to be that fast, is going to need to have some turn 1, 2, or 3 interaction on a consistent basis. So, like you said, there's really, aside from budget, and we tend to play in no budget, proxy friendly metas.
Yep.
So aside from budget, there's just not a lot of draw to those glass cannon, single color, low interaction decks anymore.
Yeah.
But what I meant by I wasn't sure about whether to attribute it to purely to Hulk is I wasn't sure if it's only because of the Hulk unban or because Hulk and partners simultaneously exist. Yeah. Like, do you think that how dominant would Hulk be if it wasn't if partners didn't exist? Because maybe we don't want to talk about this right now, but that was kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair question. We've seen people spice brewing a lot of 2-color, 3-color Hulk decks. They're, in my opinion, they're significantly weaker than any of the 4-color options, obviously. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I definitely don't think it would be the boogeyman that it is if Flash Hulk was not combined with 4-color decks.
Yeah, because I personally feel that the 4-color decks really give it the power that it needs, because just being fast and interactive is just one axis, but the 4-color decks give you Timna, which gives you an incredible amount of resiliency.
One thing I kind of wanted to mention about like these fast decks that have kind of like not been seen as much as they should, or just not being seen as much from what we experienced is, ASM, you're talking about there's that whole interaction to speed kind of a ratio going on with decks, and I think like the format has sped up enough to where like let's say Sidisi is like a turn 3 deck, Grenzo is a turn 3 deck, Saval is a turn 3 deck, but then it's like, well, you look at these other decks that like as we were talking about, like a Hulk deck or another Storm deck or just any other type of fast deck where it's like, oh, well, its average clock speed is kind of like around like 3.5, 4-ish. But the difference between them is they can usually play with heavy interaction. They can protect their combo. They can stop others from winning, if necessary.
Definitely.
So it's like, the trade-off is like, do you want to play a turn 3 deck or do you want to play a turn 3.5 plus deck with interaction? And that's like the way I see the fast decks, at least, and that's what.
And I want to clarify that when you say you feel that the format is speeding up, I want to say that when we say that we think it's speeding up, we don't mean that the games actually go faster. What we mean is that the threat to which you have to interact or be either go for the win or be able to be interactive is sooner than it used to be.
Yep.
Absolutely.
If anything, I feel that games have been going longer on average now because people don't play these glass cannon decks anymore. At least where we are. That usually someone's getting interacted with, so it takes a few tries for someone to actually pull it off.
Absolutely. No, I mean, there's been games where like I've played where I've gone like, I'm going to threaten a turn 3 win, and I've gotten interacted with on like 3 different attempts from like bounce spell to counter spell to removal, all in one turn, and this is all on turn 3. It's a different world out there.
And just
for there is so much blue.
I was just going to say the just kind of as a point of reference, I think some of these latest combo decks, like the 4-color combos, they generally play something around 20 pieces of interaction, and like a good you're usually going to be like 2 or 3 things that protect like silence or Autumn's Veil, and then you've got a handful of counter spells, and then you've got a handful of kill spells. It's usually a mix of all those 3. So I mean, I think the decks like Grenzo, I think, had something like 5, 6, 7 pieces of interaction. Like a couple spot removal spells and like a Thought Seize or something, maybe a Red Blast.
It was very few. It was very few and far between.
So your fast combo options also have a great deal of interaction they can bring to the table.
Yep. I want to say that there's actually one strange outlier in all of this, and it's Gitrog Monster. And I think it's only because he can draw so many cards and the deck is so resilient that despite not being particularly interactive, it gets there.
Yeah, the thing about
keep trying over and over again.
I mean, we have a frog in our meta, right? In fact, Stark, who actually won the
Reddit tournament,
the recent Reddit tournament, playing his frog deck, is a pretty talented pilot. So we see that deck a lot. But the best things, you're right. It doesn't play that much interaction, but it dodges so much interaction. Like you have to basically give them with a torpor a curse totem, or like a replacement graveyard effect. Because
like Rest in Peace.
Yeah, so it'll just keep coming. It doesn't even need to cast spells or And of course, it has access to to add Nas and Necro and all those broken draw spells. So it's just a different beast.
Yeah, one thing that also is like kind of like a small common misconception with Gitrog is people think that, oh, if he assembles Gitrog plus Discard Atlas plus Dakmor, he wins. Like, yeah, he does. But what people don't realize is that if you can just win with Gitrog plus Discard Outlet plus any Dredger, because as long as the Dredger hits lands, you're eventually going to hit Dakmor, and then you win from there. So like it gives like Gitrog like this whole kind of just surprise factor where like it doesn't matter if I can just drop my discard out and just start discarding Dredgers and hopefully hitting lands and just win from there, or just winning from anything.
Yeah, the deck is very resilient. I guess while we're on the topic of decks that seem to be holding steady, 3-color Storm is still good, still popular. People are still playing it. Didn't go anywhere despite all the 4C craze.
And all the blood clotted stacksiness and all that stuff.
Yep. I can't say that it's gotten a ton of new toys, and for the most part, the decks look pretty similar to maybe last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Yeah. But I would say the biggest change has been a great amount of slimming down, and that's pretty much it. And it's not even that many cards.
Well, the one change that I have seen that I think each of you has experimented with a little bit is potentially swapping out the Doomsday package, which seems crazy, right? That's like sort of the trademark. That's the trademark of the deck. But Wedge, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the stuff you're trying and why you would even consider something like that?
So just to kind of preface, I think Doomsday should be in Zur. It's like 100 because that's its plan A. Well, not its plan A, but it's one of its main plans. But like in Grixis Storm, which is what I'm playing, I don't think it's necessary. One thing that has been kind of a problem is, like there's more stacks decks. There's more stacksy mid-rangey decks that are out there that are trying to hit that are trying to play global, very potent stacks pieces like Spheres, Rule of Law effects, Graveyard Hate, that kind of stuff. And the thing is that when you play those effects, they stop both the Storm plan and the Doomsday plan. If one Sphere's in play, Doomsday is pretty much out of the question. You're not going to be able to play it as a win con. Just to play like a basic pile would cost you like 8 mana or more, and that's just not feasible. If someone plays a Rule of Law effect, you just can't Doomsday. If there's a Graveyard Hate piece in play, you cannot do the most mana efficient piles for Doomsday. The LED Yawgmoth's Will piles. So you have to rely on the more mana intensive piles. And all those same stacks pieces that I just described also slow down or stop Storm, entirely. So it's like, why should I have a plan B that is just as like that gets stopped by that my plan A also gets stopped by? So we've like me and a bunch of the other people who have been playing Kess have been experimenting with playing Demonic Consultation with Laboratory Maniac as an alternate win con. So for me, I've cut the entire Doomsday package out of my list, which was, Doomsday, Gush, and Night's Whisper. Swapped out DD for Demonic Consultation, and swapped out Gush for Unearth, and swapped out Night's Whisper for pretty much anything I want. So what that results in is a slimmer deck for, slimmer Nas, and a plan B win that gets under a ton of stacks pieces. Because with Kess and Demonic Consultation, you can pretty much cast Demonic Consultation, get your Labman, cast Labman, cast Demonic Consultation, play a cantrip, and you win. It's great.
Yeah, notably, one really nice thing about it in Kess is that it's essentially a 2-card combo of Demonic Consultation plus a cantrip.
Yep.
So in that respect, it's very similar to Doomsday. Except that your color requirements are a little bit easier.
Yeah.
In Zur, it actually feels very different to me. I like it, but it's not really a plan. It's not really as good of a plan B because you can't do the Demonic Consultation and flashback Demonic Consultation thing.
Yeah, you have to like really.
So it's effectively a 3-card combo where you need Demonic Consultation, Labman, and a cantrip.
Yeah.
What I do like about it is that it is another line that you can do without when your life total is low. I do like that it is actually fairly easy to assemble post nauseum. Sometimes the whole flashback ad nauseum plus Angel's Grace thing can be kind of expensive. I mean, it is a whole 6 mana thing, and you need to Yogg will your nauseum back. So it is. It actually can be expensive. Sometimes you don't have the mana for that. I do will say that I usually still go that line anyway.
Yeah.
But it's not terrible to have the demonic consultation. And there's been times where, especially post necropotence, you're like, oh, I can win right now if I have a demonic consultation, and that's the line you take. It's easier than Doomsday sometimes because of the triple black can be rough. But I would say that I've gone back on cutting Doomsday. I put it back. I just wanted to try it without Doomsday, but I put it back in because I found that at least with Zur, where fetching out necropotence is a large part of some of your game plans. Having access to Doomsday is like you need something that you want to actually find after necropotence, and ad nauseum is usually not really a viable line after necropotence unless you're lucky enough to get both pieces for the for nauseum plus Angel's Grace. And some Zur pilots have gone in on the shimmer plan instead, and I think that might be. I wouldn't say it may or may not replace Doomsday, but it is also like for me, Doomsday is something that I want to have because you need something to do after you necropotence, and ad nauseum is usually not that good after necropotence.
Yeah. So Wedge, since you've been playing around with that package, like what percentage of your wins do you think come from consultation versus storming off?
It's right now, I would say it's about like a 30-70 right now. Like
which way?
Most of my wins are storm right now. And then like about 30% are my labman, like demonic consultation lines. One cool thing that I've really liked about it is intuition is pretty much my new Doomsday. So if I have Kess in play, intuition, and a cantrip in play, I can win from a simple intuition pile of Unearth, Labman, and Demonic Consultation. No matter what they give me, I can win right from that. If they give me Unearth, I grab Labman, I cast Demonic Consultation, and play my cantrip and win, or whatever combination I can do with it. But it's been really fun. I'm still playing and testing with it. It's my most successful deck in ranked right now. I think I've got I'm at like 9 wins so far. I think 5 or 6 of them are with Kess. So pretty much a good portion of them have all been Storm. I've gotten like 1 Labman win from ranked, but in paper games, I've also been getting a good number of Labman wins as well. So.
Okay, cool. So let's move on a little bit, but real quick, let's just touch on a couple more decks that we think are kind of holding steady. I mean, we talked about Teferi is obviously a big piece of the meta and is doing what it does just as well, even though it hasn't necessarily gotten many new pieces in the last couple sets. I don't think it definitely got a bump from the Kaladesh block where it got Inventor's Fair and War of Invention and all that other stuff.
Yeah, so getting two artifact tutors is pretty sweet.
Yep.
Actually, it did get something new in Battle Bond.
Oh, what is it?
Spellseeker. It grabs Transmute Artifact.
Okay, fair enough. Yep, I wasn't sure if that was going in there for sure or not.
No, it
also grabs High
definitely
Tide.
Will be, because Transmute Artifact is one of your most efficient tutors besides Tezzeret. So yeah, it gets Transmute Artifact. It also gets High Tide if you need to have rocks. Well, rocks, but High Tide effectively works a lot better than your rocks for the combo. So it actually gets everything you need in the deck. Either both halves of your combo, either the mana or the Chain Veil.
Yeah. So we are going to talk a little bit more about Spellseeker a little bit later. So that's an interesting card from Battle Bond that I think you're going to see a lot of in the future.
Yep. So steady decks, we talked about 3C Storm. We talked a little about Gitrog, which has pretty much always been a steady as she goes. Teferi, those would probably be like the most like steady decks I think we've seen lately, right?
So what do you think, real quick, like the current state of stacks? So you have you have Blood Pod, which has quite a few different permutations.
Yeah.
And then you've also got Yisan. And I think we kind of went back and forth on those two, whether they are, rising, falling, holding steady. What do you guys think?
So you want to go first, ASM?
Sure. Yisan, actually, I haven't really seen Yisan too much online. Um, I remember I saw a Reverse Mermaid. He once said Yisan is the deck that everyone has, but nobody plays. But I've seen like Maynard play it like one time, but and I know Nixus in our paper play group plays it pretty often.
Yeah, we see our paper group a lot. Yeah.
He's actually
but I think he's very sad because Wedge keeps playing Urza's Ruinous Blast and crushing his dreams.
No, he's been kind of in he's been a little bit in depression mode with Yisan because like any deck that's black is packing like Toxic Deluge. There's Fire Covenants running around for Blood Pod. Urza's Ruinous Blast on Sisay. I've got Rolling Earthquake, Toxic Deluge, and I think one other board wipe that I'm not thinking of. And Kess, and I'm just like,
and the fact that Urza's Ruinous Blast exiles the cards and doesn't even just put them in the graveyard is so backbreaking.
Yeah, I just think like right now the meta that we have in our paper group is just not very kind to Yisan as of lately. Back in the day when it's like when there was like a bunch of like Staxy decks in our meta. It was like Yisan was just the belle of the ball, like someone would just land a turn 2 Trinisphere, right after like someone resolved Yisan, and you just throw up your shoulders and be like, so Yisan wins, I guess. And now
I mean that's the kind of meta that Yisan thrives in, and so I'm not exactly extremely surprised that he's kind of taken a back seat. And I think actually one contributing factor to that is that online people play, we have no budget online, so everyone is playing like 4C fast decks or even not so fast decks. But the thing is like Yisan doesn't have like many ways to interact with a lot of the 4-color decks. Like how is he going to interact with Hulk or Razaketh? Like he does have weight, like he can revoke her, but like it's a bit slower behind the clock than what they can do.
Yeah.
It also doesn't help that literally every deck that's not running green main boards Cursed Totem.
Yes. So I was going to talk about that a little bit at some point, but Wedge, you had mentioned a couple of the stronger stacks pieces earlier, but I think the two strongest creature hate stacks pieces that sit on the board are probably Totem and Grafdigger's Cage. And
they are
those both.
And Linvala.
Yeah,
Linvala.
And I think you guys nailed it. That's part of just our meta is that Wedge plays Sisay sometimes, and when Sisay gets in a pod with Yisan, they're often just racing to jam out Linvala, which is no fun. Yeah, so I think Yisan. I mean, everybody knows it's sort of it's great for playing into pods where you have some Staxy help. It gets under the Staxy pods nicely, but it's going to suffer against those decks that are gearing up to try to combat the 4-color creature combo decks, like you mentioned. Rolling Earthquake is everywhere, Cursed Totem is everywhere, Grafdiggers is everywhere. So it's kind of you're either a creature deck or you're not.
Yep. What was the?
Actually, you guys were talking about stacks earlier, and one thing that I've kind of noticed is that a lot of like pure prison style stacks decks have taken a backseat aside from Blood Pod. Although even Blood Pod, I haven't seen as much online. Like one thing I've noticed is that there are a lot of decks that play some stacks pieces, but not a lot of decks that play a lot of stacks pieces.
Yeah.
I can say that like easily the most popular ones are like Curse Totem, Graph Cage, Back to Basics, No Rod, and some Stony Science in the equivalent, as a equivalent No Rod, and Aven Mind Sensor and Linvala, and like those are like there's decks that are not particularly stacksy, but they'll play like just the best ones because like Aven Mind Sensor is incredibly backbreaking for your opponents.
One thing I have noticed is you were talking about like Prison taking more of a backseat. Like Blood Pod is been like Lurker's been like really pushing this, that Blood Pod should be played as a mid-range deck, where you're going to try and you want to try and stacks out the table just enough for you to be able to slip your win in, because you just win off of a 1-card win con with Birthing Pod. And that's something that I've been noticing with like the more successful like kind of stacks decks that have been around the meta. And like I guess they're not really stacks decks, really, they're more mid-range, I guess that's the proper term, where you see like there's like Hulk, it's like the traditional Hulk Weaver, where it's like, oh hey, I want to play bears and slow down the table enough for me to jam out my win at my leisure. And then the same thing with Blood Pod, while like the more prison styles haven't been seeing them as much, even though we've been hearing about them being developed. There's like the whole Timnatana Tippy Tappy Thrashy Smashy, or whatever you want to call it.
Maybe you want to talk about that a little bit, because I feel like a lot of people don't know what that is, and I barely know what that is.
Yeah,
people aren't going to know what that is.
Yeah, well, to be talked about later.
Okay.
Oh, you don't want to talk about that?
Okay. Fine.
I mean, just tell me what it is, because I barely even know what it is. I played against it once.
So, please forgive me to the Timnatana Tap Stacks players, brewers out there, for me butchering your deck description. But from what I've seen is that this is a deck that's based around mana denial and prison effects, and using things like Winter Orb and a bunch of other different types of Staxy cards to just slow the game down to a crawl, and then win through just eventual card advantage, and assembling like some sort of win that can play under these mana denial things, such as I think the main thing is Squirrel's Nest plus Earthcraft is the main win that they've been going for.
Yeah, I think a lot of them are even cutting that. So from what I've seen, it's Wedge basically described it, but essentially it's like a 4-color Derevi deck. So you're trying to break parity on orb effects that keep your stuff tapped. You're trying to break parity with things like Seedborn Moons and Derevi, and actually try to close the deal with something like Stasis. If you can, there aren't really many CEDH decks that can take full advantage of Stasis. You have basically Teferi, but it needs to stick Teferi to make it work, right? So this is kind of the second deck that's really trying to abuse Stasis, which is obviously a powerful card, but you need ways to break parity. So they have things like Sun Titan and whatever the Green Ranger that returns a forest, and some different stuff to try to break a tap down lock. And I do think the win con is usually just beat down with things like Sun Titan and some other stuff. So it's definitely it's an experimental deck. It's only a month or two old. Shout out to Pongo from Team Turn 3, who I think is kind of the first one to at least bring it to our attention. But
I'm not surprised that the man loves Derevi.
Yeah, he does love his Derevi. Yeah.
All right. So
moving on. Do we want to talk about what uptrading decks now? I guess.
Sure. Go ahead.
So
sure. Oh, okay. Oh, you go ahead, Wedge.
So the trending up decks, these are just decks that we've seen that have been being used pretty frequently in the LFG ranked on Trice, and the ones that we've seen that have been having the most success so far. So the decks that we've been seeing are there's like 4C Hulk Ball style and Flash Hulk style lists. So things like Hulk Weaver. There's Sick Robots, Hulk Ball list, I think he calls it. I can't believe it's not Viral's.
Well, he doesn't call it Hulk Ball anymore because he cut the ball.
Oh yeah. He plays it a more a different like Hulk pile now.
So Wedge, real quick. So just a Hulk Ball list. If you haven't played against that, it's generally it's just a Hulk deck that uses Flash Hulk or reanimates Hulk with Necromancy. But the WinCon package, it used to be Micaeus and Walking Ballista to ping him to death with a sack outlet. So I think there's an intermediate step there where you have to, your first fetch gets a sack outlet plus a reanimator card, but that's your eventual win con. And then I think he has moved away from that, but that's the basis of a Hulk Ball deck is working to a Hulk win con package of Mike plus Ballista.
Oh man, Six gonna be mad at me because I forgot what the line is now. What you replaced it with?
I actually know the new line. The new line.
Oh, you do?
Malira, the one that prevents -1/-1 counters.
Oh, right. Yeah, right.
Plus, Disciple of the Vault and a Scarecrow with Persist. I forget what his name is. I think it's called like Wing Rattle Scarecrow or something like that.
He's not using the colors right now. He's using the green.
Yeah, there's a green
one.
card with Persist.
The Elf Warrior.
Oh, okay, even better. So sweet. Okay, so that one.
Yeah, it's because that way you can get Blood Artist plus Malira plus this. I think it's Safe Hold Elite or something like that.
I think that's the one. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so you just sack the Persist dude infinitely. It's pretty similar to the old Modern combo where you sack Kitchen Finks for infinite life.
But instead of it,
basically like that.
But instead of infinite life, you just win the game. So yeah, that deck has actually been at the top of the leaderboards on the LFG ranked. I think Sick is probably commanding about a 50% win rate, I think, or like 46, something along those lines.
I also want to say that he is the only person playing the deck, and also Sick is a very good pilot. So
100%.
But I've played that deck quite a bit, or something similar to it. It's a good deck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that deck has been getting a lot of success. Another list that we've another deck that's been doing pretty well has been 4-color Reanimator or Razakets is what it's called. That's actually one of my main decks that I pilot. It's a ton of fun. And the whole way that deck wins is essentially by reanimating Razaketh, just getting it into play, and you can win at a bare minimum board state of 1 creature and 2 lands. As long as Razaketh is in play. So it's
or amusingly, sometimes you just win off a really fast reanimated Jin and nobody can do anything.
100%. Like a nice turn 1 to turn 2 Jin is very, very, very tasty. I mean, like if
by Jin we mean Jin Gitaxias. I'm not sure if there are any other Jins out there, but Jin Gitaxias.
Yeah, if he survives like a whole turn cycle, it pretty much means that the game is over. If it's like really early in the game. Because everybody's discarded their entire hands down to 0, and they've pretty much shown that they can't answer Jin. So every turn you're drawing 7 cards and they're in top deck mode from that point on. And so you essentially you can just win through value. And that's actually one thing that's really great about Razakets in general is it is like, I think it's the best deck or one of the best decks to play in blind tables, like period. Like no matter what type of table composition, like am I going to be going against 3 fast decks or am I going to be going against like 2 stacks decks and a parasitic deck? This deck it's very easy to play the fast game. It's really very comfortable just playing the grind. It loves to play the grind against like those stacksy matchups because you have no problem. You're just going to draw cards and just eke out value and let everybody else get slowed down by stacks. And then just...
It turns out that Timna is pretty ridiculous at drawing a lot of cards.
Absolutely.
I also want to say that it's actually quite interesting to me that for a very long time there wasn't a real reanimator strategy in CDH. People were reanimating like necrotic
Twin and News were the closest things to or Kiki Jiki.
But you weren't reanimating like a game-ending fatty, You're just so I think it's quite interesting.
Razaketh really kind of put like Reanimator on the map because it's the first card where if it hits the table, you just win. There's nothing really additional other than a dork.
Yeah, but it's not. I feel like a lot of it is also partly that there's the 4C thing has like actual good 4C generals have given it a good shell to actually play the strategy.
Yeah, I think Wedge, you may just want to real quick for the people that haven't played against the deck. Could you walk through just the two basic win lines? Like once
Yeah.
Razaketh hits play, there's two main lines that you can take. What are
Absolutely.
they? Yep.
So the main line is it's called the Eternal Witness line, where essentially you sack a creature to grab like Lion's Eye Diamond, and then you play Lion's Eye Diamond, get like triple green, sack a second creature, and you can then grab Eternal Witness. Using this method, you can now cast Eternal Witness, grab Lion's Eye Diamond back, play Lion's Eye Diamond, get your 3 colors of mana, sacrifice Eternal Witness, grab a reanimation piece that costs less than 3 mana, which, there's Life and Death, there's Reanimate, there's Dance of the Dead, there's Animate Dead. And each time you do this, you net 1 mana, and you can essentially build up enough mana to to tutor for Auriok Salvagers, play Auriok Salvagers, and then grab your LED and get infinite mana. And once you have infinite mana, you can win through a myriad of ways, but the main way is once you have infinite mana, you can just play your Eternal Witness and then play Winds of Rebuke on it and keep bouncing it back and forth and milling the entire table to 0. The other way that you can win is through Blood Artist loops, using Lane and Relic Order, and a reanimation enchantment spell like Necromancy or Animate Dead or whatever. And that's actually pretty easy to assemble too with Razaketh, because you can do something like sack that, like, you reanimate Razaketh with Animate Dead. You can, sacrifice a creature, grab Lane and Relic Order, cast Lane and Relic Order, target when it ETBs, you target that reanimation spell, and you sack Lane and Relic Order with Razaketh's ability. And then that spell blinks, or that the reanimation spell blinks, comes back into play, and it brings back Lane and Relic Order, and then Lane and Relic Order exiles it, and then you sack Razaketh. You sack it with Razaketh again, and you essentially can stack tutors until you're ready to stop, and you essentially have a grip of however many tutors you want for as much life as you have to win, and you can assemble a Blood Artist loop from there.
Yeah. Yep.
The TLDR is go read the primer.
Shaper has a nice primer that you can read if you want, but you basically either ritual up through LED, or you recast life death to give make all your lands into dudes, and then you have as many fetches as you have lands, basically.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I kind of rambled on that.
No, that was good.
I know a lot about the deck.
No, there's nothing wrong with that.
And
but there are many more lines and interesting ways you can go about things. So and tips and tricks that Shaper has covered in his primer.
Even more. We have there's so much to discuss on that deck. But anyways, yeah. So those are the decks that have been trending up. I guess let's move on to our next topic. Battle Bond cards, or the ones that are worth talking about.
Yeah, we're not going to do a full set review, but we'll give a quick little overview of cards that we think are interesting from Battle Bond. Let's actually just start with the lands, just because it's quick and easy. Excellent duels that are pretty much only 2-headed giant in EDH or other multiplayer format playable. So get your play set, because or not your play set, but get however many you need.
Hey, a commander play set is only 1.
Yep, that is true.
I would maybe grade them a little bit less highly. I mean, they're I would say they're fine duels. I think they're obviously not fetchable, which matters a lot. But
yeah,
I think that they're good to go in over pain lands. So any deck where you have pain lands, you could just do a 1-for-1 swap, because there's almost no utilization of the colorless mana mode in CEDH. So it's a pretty straightforward swap there, but other than budget reasons, they're not going to go in for shocks or duels, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the big thing is that they're shocks. They're budget duels that have pretty much no drawback.
Yep. Yeah.
But I do think that some color intensive decks will want to replace a basic with one of these. I know for me and Zur, I'm going to replace Underground River with a
Morphic Pool.
Yep, with the Morphing Pool or something like that, or whatever. And I'm sure some other decks or 2-color decks will be happy to have an extra duel that doesn't cost life.
Yeah, agreed on the 2-color decks. But I do want to say and we can probably get into this more so on a later time. But I don't a lot of the people that I see like on the subreddit and just people that are newer to CEDH, they don't really utilize the 5 color lands that much for even for 2 or 3 color, but also for especially for 4 color. You almost always, maybe that's too strong of a statement, but you often want uh, City of Brass, Mana Confluence, both Orchards, Forbidden and Exotic, and Tarnished Citadel. And a lot of people just don't run them because they're either scared of the damage or scared of giving out the Spirit token or whatever the case may be. But it, it's usually good to have all 5 of those if you're playing 4 color, and especially like Forbidden Orchard. Uh, I've seen a lot of interesting plays, especially lately, where having Timna everywhere in the meta, if you have a Forbidden Orchard and it's untapped, you can really mess with Timna combat math. So if Timna is swinging at one of your opponents, you can give them a blocker, or obviously any of Timna's creatures on that side. That's going to go in for a free card. You can get an interceptor in there, or even like if there's a lot of 1/3 creatures out there. So I think it isn't Thracios and Baral are both 1/3s. So like if they come in with a 2/2 like a Timna, you can throw in another blocker to give them 2 power,
and then gang block it.
They can kill Timna. So you can do some cool stuff. It's not always a drawback. So I just want to say I think more people should utilize more of the 5 color lands, which gives you less of a reason to need the new 2 color lands.
I agree.
Yeah, they are definitely excellent.
Yeah, I think in the end, like the only battle bond land that's going to be relevant is really going to be Morphic Pool, the black blue one. Just because like in certain lists, they've already exhausted all their 5 color lands, and it's like this is like a great land for tainted pack land bases. Where you've already used up all of your rainbow lands and all that. And, you can replace that underground river with a Morphic Pool.
Actually, oddly enough, there's almost no 2 color decks that are played that are actually allied colored. A lot of them are enemy colored.
Yeah, the only one that really sees the only allied color deck that you see play are pretty much UB decks and Sisay.
I mean, even UB decks are not exactly like pure UB decks are not exactly popular.
Right.
No, they're kind of trending down. So yeah, you don't see a lot of Una, but yeah, I mean a lot of the 4 color. I guess there's not really 5 color major decks right now, but the 4 color decks are usually bug shell. So so you do see like some Yavimaya Coast out there and stuff, which obviously I don't think you're going to get one of those, right? You're not getting a blue green, are you? From
There's
Battle
no, it's only they're only allied color right now.
Right. So I think Wedge might be right. Maybe blue black is probably the one to go grab.
It's the only one that I'm playing to pick up.
Yeah, it's the only one I'm going to be buying from Battle Bond.
Oh, you're not getting the white green one? Do you
know? I guess I guess I would. I do want that in Sisay.
Yeah, I think Sisay will play that one.
Yeah. All right. So moving on from those lands, let's talk about like
Spellseeker.
Which to be honest, it's really the biggest card in Battle Bond, and it's besides these dual lands, they're really the only like card that's worth looking at this point, from what we've seen from the set. And it's a doozy of a card. It's pretty sweet. It does a lot for a lot of decks that need it.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I think it's going to do a lot for Hulk decks. So thus far, the only deck that can really get away with flashing a Hulk and having a Grand Abolisher in the first fetch pile is Breakfast Hulk, and it's a big reason why that deck has kind of emerged as one of the top handful, according to most people, myself included. But with Spellseeker, you can actually it essentially gives you a 4 mana cost but 3 CMC cost reanimation spell. So usually when you start looping Hulk piles, or you flash in Hulk and then you want to bring Hulk back, there's an opportunity for interaction, but there's you know there's only so many bodies that will reanimate Hulk, right? There's Body Snatcher, there's Karmic Guide, there's Phyrexian Delver, um, and then you can do some stuff with like Academy Rector into Animate Dead, but none of those you can fetch Grand Abolisher on your first pile. So what this card does with Spellseeker, you can actually include Spellseeker in your first Hulk fetch along with Grand Abolisher, and then you can use the Spellseeker fetch to grab Reanimate and bring back Hulk. But now you have Grand Abolisher protection, so I think it's going to bring the strength of a lot of the peripheral Hulk decks up.
Yep. I mean, even those are not exactly peripheral, but they'll be even more powerful.
Right.
Yeah. Actually, one thing is that, and one thing to know is that although that Reanimate costs 1 extra mana, if you don't really care about if you're not worried about Grand Abolisher or like needing a Grand Abolisher, you can still make manaless piles with like Cloud of Fairies or something like that. Because you actually have space to include it now.
So, so Spellseeker, as you were just talking about, it does quite a bit for Hulk decks. It also does quite a bit for blue X decks, such as like Teferi, and other like blue decks that desperately need an extra tutor, like JVP. I mean, even the Grand Arbiter, anything like that is they're gonna be welcome additions to see, because Spellseeker can grab, transmute artifact, which can get you like their Ice Crown Scepter or whatever combo piece they need. It can grab Dramatic Reversal, so it can grab either halves of that. And
yeah, I would say that for JVP in particular, having it is vastly better than Dizzy Spell, because 2U is much better than UU1, and the fact that it can also that you can, because of the 2 colorless, you can actually like it's more feasible to play at the same turn that you cast High Tide instead of like casting and passing. Because casting Dizzy Spell transmuting Dizzy Spell and casting High Tide in the same turn is like that's a lot of blue. Yeah. It's almost impossible. But and Teferi, I would say, probably came out the biggest winner for the non-Hulk decks with it, because it literally fetches everything that you could possibly need for your combo. It either grabs Transmute Artifact to fetch Chainveil, or you can use it to grab High Tide if you need the mana per permanent ratio for Chainveil. And if you already got those, or you don't need that right now, you can get Cyclonic Rift to bounce the board, or a number of other things that are excellent.
I will say though that if you are a non-Hulk deck and you have access to black, you may not want it, just because Grim Tutor is kind of like a fringe play. Like, some decks have it, but it's not like a auto include in every single black deck. And so if you're not going to use the body and and you have access to black, it would go in. Yeah, why not just play Grim Tutor instead? So I think that was kind of the thought when I asked some of the other Tazri pilots if they were going to jam it in. The thought was no. Even though you could presumably use that body for food chain mana, it just wasn't really worth it.
Yeah, I mean, 3 is not exactly an efficient tutor. What it has going for it is for decks that don't have access to instant sorcery tutors. Like, surprisingly, blue doesn't have very many instant sorcery tutors. You would think it does, but it's best at finding artifacts.
One thing to kind of go back to the Hulk side of the things with Spellseeker is that it also has been kind of it's like a tie-in to kind of merge Hulk strategies and Razaketh strategies together into one deck, and that's like what Spellseeker does, using like those Hulk piles that you were kind of talking about, and it allows you to kind of pivot from a Flash Hulk straight into a Razaketh pile of sorts. And there's like a nice list that's been going around. It's still in testing, obviously, because the card was spoiled like a week ago, 2 weeks ago or something. So it's to be seen how well it does. Maybe it'll be on one of the trending up decks next month or whatever, you know. So that deck remains to be seen. I think it's a pretty cool, exciting like idea to have a deck that actually where those two strategies can like kind of mesh together. But personally, I'm not going to play it because I'm kind of obsessed with like slot slot efficiency, and that's kind of what attracts me to like the Razakath Reanimator strategy is that like the number of dead cards is very minimal. While like in Hulk decks, you do run a couple of combo pieces there where they're like, this is a combo piece. This does nothing else other than be a combo piece for when you have Flash Hulk.
I mean, Blood Artist and LED are
I actually
kind of don't do a whole lot outside of that. But
I think Blood Artist is a dead card. I don't think LED is a dead card in Razakats. I think it has a lot of applications that make it.
What do you use for it outside of
I've done things where like I've played like a tutor and then held priority and activated LED. So that way.
I've never been ballsy enough to do that.
Just play silence first. Easy. Come on.
I mean, yeah, if I had a silence, then I'm fine with it. But
yeah, I've done things where I've literally had like a reanimation target in hand and a black tutor, and so I'll play LED, play the black tutor, hold priority, dump the fatty, grab the reanimation piece, and then go to town. So I definitely think LED has some applications, but either way though, you're still and if you're counting LED as a dead card, that's like 2 dead cards out of the 98. While like there's much more other dead cards in like Hulk combination lists, but but it's just a matter of preference.
So yeah, Spellseeker, definitely the most exciting card from BBD for me besides the UV duel. But I guess we can just touch on briefly on like the other couple cards. I don't really have much to say about them. There's been a lot of talk about Najeela on the Discord server and also on the subreddit. I haven't really been keeping tabs with what people are really doing with it, but I haven't exactly seen anything that really impressed me. But the set's not even out yet, so we'll hold off, and maybe it will be a thing, maybe it won't be. Who knows? But it does have an efficient 1-card combo, or I guess it's one other card combo with it, right? With Najeela. And to clarify, Najeela is the 3 mana red creature legend, and she has like a 5-color ability, so she's effectively a 5-color commander. And she lets you untap all your creatures and swing again. I think and only untaps warriors, I think. Interesting card. And then the other one is Arena Rector, which unfortunately I don't think has any place in CDH because unfortunately the broken cards are enchantments. And not so many planeswalkers that are kind of breaking everything.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead too.
I don't really have much to add. I mean, I've seen a couple of the draft brews of Najeela. I saw one that was kind of had a handful of Staxy cards to sort of slow people down while they try to set up a board state. The other ones were just more like utility creature based. I guess it's the one thing I wanted to just say is that there's probably some potential there just from the standpoint of at first glance it's not totally obvious that the ability can just sort of spiral out of control because as you start getting more warriors, each of those warriors creates more warriors, which goes exponential. So you can have a relatively modest board state and pretty quickly escalate to a win con. It's going to be dependent on having Najeela around, so you're sort of soft to that if she gets removed or anything. Mm-hmm. A few of us, about 6 months ago, were playing around with some Derevi control lists that tried to kind of go infinite or go exponential in the same way, where we had kind of a series of token creators that usually it was like tap to create a token, and then you would use Derevi's ability and the token's attack to untap the generator. So it was kind of cool in theory because you could sort of, as you got more tokens, you got more untaps, which made more tokens. But in practice, it never really worked out quite as well as we thought it would. So I ended up dropping that deck, and didn't, I mean, maybe there's something there, but I get the sense that Najeela is kind of going to be the same, where it's really cool when it works, but it's my sense is that, I mean, it's 5 colors, so you can have a lot of good cards in there. The floor for a 5 color good stuff deck is pretty low,
Right.
pretty high, I should say. Um, but I guess we should reserve judgment, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a 5 color deck.
Oh, actually, there is one other card that is relevant that I almost forgot about, and it also happens to be a warrior.
Oh, Mind Blood Render.
It's the it's the second
that
Bob.
card's sweet.
Yeah, we forgot about that one.
Yeah, I'll definitely see some play. Turns out, 2 mana card draw engine is usually something that at least a few decks are interested in.
I'm definitely going to be trying it out in Razakats. Having a like Bob is like such a strong card, and having almost a Bob, like a Bob Light of that card just makes me like, I'm okay with this.
Are you interested in trying it in Kess, or is this something that you don't feel is something is worth playing?
It's another. I mean, so Kess's like biggest problem is she's not gas in the command zone like Jaleva is. So we have to play extra gas cards that are, to help get her through that kind of hump. So that's why we include things like Bob and Deck Faden and such like that. So it's like I could honestly, see myself swapping out like either like a fringe card in my list for Mindblade Render, or maybe even Dak. But that's to be seen right now. I definitely want to test it for sure. I think the card's great.
Yeah, I might try it in Zero over JVP, because JVP is sometimes good, sometimes kind of lackluster for me. But it'll be interesting to see these Mindblade, if there's like multiple Mindblade Render games. Like, how do people do it? Like, are you guys both going to swing, or are you guys going to decide to hold back? It'll be interesting. Because interesting card thing about it is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't. It's not just your Mindblade Render hitting that actually draws cards. If someone else's Mindblade Render hits someone, you also draw the cards.
Right. Yeah, I think this is going to be a card that is going to be less good if you play in mixed metas or sort of high-powery creature-based metas.
Yeah.
Because obviously it has to connect to get the card. You still get the card the turn after you play it, presumably. But yeah, if you're in a lot of casual games where you see a lot of blockers, you may not want to be on this card. But I think for CEDH full power, where you don't really see many creatures besides dorks on the first few turns, and nobody's going to want to block the dork. Nope. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's a 1/3 is pretty relevant for stats in CEDH.
It is a pretty hard. I mean, it's not too hard to block it, but not many things will probably be around to block it right at the. At least you'll find one player.
The one thing I think you might see is, like, as the game drags on, like later in the game where the turns are so important and so much stuff can happen, like you might see it get chump blocked in the late game, where it's just like, they could be setting up a big play off of like an instant speed top of deck tutor or something like that. You'll just throw something in front of it.
Yeah, that card is Mindblade Render is sweet. I can't wait to see it in play. I can't wait to see it in a lot of decks. It's going to. I think it's definitely going to see play in quite a bit of decks.
Yep, I'm definitely interested in picking up one for myself. All right, let's wrapping up with BVD. We're good to go there. Let's go with
final topic.
Well, we've been through quite a bit of the podcast. But let's go with the 4-color partners.
I think this is going to be our last topic for the night, we don't have to spend forever on it. I'm sure this is something we'll talk about a lot. As time goes on. But I guess just one of the questions that we're always asking ourselves on the Discord or within our play group is, as 4-color partners emerged and we saw the strength of Thracias and Timna, and a lot of different decks kind of came under that banner of those two partners. We did see the strategies kind of expand, so you could you could do a lot of different reanimation strategies. You could do a lot of different infinite mana combo or infinite mana based strategies. You could do creature based strategies and leverage Timna. Um, so that there's good diversity there, but you see a lot less of sort
Commander
of
diversity.
the commander diversity and commander based strategies. It's pushed a lot of decks, including my poor Rurikthar, basically to the edge of the meta or almost out. Um, so, what do you guys think in terms of is CDH in a good spot with so many 4-color partner decks, or is it something you'd like to see, addressed? I don't think the rules committee is ever going to address it, but is it just, I guess, what are your thoughts on the current state of the meta?
I want to say uh, about maybe even as close as 3 months ago, I would say that I felt very much that they were a problem. Right now, I actually still think they are a problem, but I'm not really sure if it's a good or bad thing. Like one thing that kind of irks me about them is that although they all have introduced a lot of deck diversity, even though there's like a strategy diversity, a lot of the decks are actually incredibly similar. Like if you actually look at the 99, like, or I guess 98, like there's a huge amount of overlap. There's basically like two general flavors. You're either the creature based version or the not creature based version. But because you're playing 4 colors, like you can't just not include like the best cards in those colors, you know? So like just by including the staples and your lands, you already covers almost the entire like at least like 80
no,
cards.
the differences between something like a Hulk deck and like Razakats or something like that probably differs by maybe 20 cards, maybe a little bit, maybe a little more, maybe a little less.
Yeah, I don't know if it's really bad though, because on the flip side, like you also have to like I mean like one thing it's basically doing is that it's saying that like new legendaries that get printed pretty much always have to pass the Thrastimna test, which is if I play this general, is it does it do something that Thrastimna doesn't do better? Like would I rather just even if it's like a bit worse than what this general does, would I rather just have 4 colors because that gives me way more raw power in my deck?
Right.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same boat. I have sort of mixed feelings on it as a as a brewer. It's fun to brew new funky commanders, and you always have in the back of your mind like, oh man, I'm just gonna get blown out by by 4-color whatever, right? Um, so it's a little frustrating in that sense, but I mean, at the end of the day, I think the meta is healthy. I mean, you sit down at a table, whether it's online or in person, and there's a ton of different decks. You're never playing, you rarely see like two of the exact same deck in the same pod. There's still 30 30 viable decks, right? Or something like that.
I want to say the last few games that I've actually played in ranked online have been like 3x Thrastimna. They're all different 3x Thrastimna. They're all different Thrastimna decks, but
Well, that's what
there's
I
three of
mean.
them.
That's what I mean. It's like it's different strategies. It's not the same 100 cards, but um,
Well, actually, they're different, but they a lot of them still fall under a similar axis. If you play Curse, it probably
right,
stops all of them.
right. So
Yeah.
I'm conflicted about it. I wouldn't necessarily advocate for like a ban or anything, um, but it's just the world we live in now. So
One thing I did notice that, and it's something that we kind of touched on like at the beginning of the podcast, is that their emergence of like a high popularity in Thrastimna has made the meta even more interactive than it has been because you can play these fast decks and you get to have blue. And I've noticed that in general, like there's a lot more counter spells flying around in a game just because like maybe before you had 1 or 2 players on blue, but now like it's 3 or 4. Like pretty much everybody can run blue. And there's some Thrastimna decks that don't actually really run any counter spells, or maybe they run like, just the best ones. But like Hulk Weaver is an example who mostly plays bears and doesn't really use as much counter magic type interaction. Um, but it has been, I think, a positive impact on the game because I don't think that the pure glass cannon type decks are bad, but I do think that having more interactive games is
Better.
it rewards good decision making more than just die
Yep.
roll.
Yeah, and kind of the myth that you just cast Hermit Druid on turn 2 and then win, or cast Flash Hulk on turn 2 and win is a myth. I mean, yeah, it happens occasionally, but it's really the exception and not the rule. I mean, most of the games that we play in, that there's a ton of back and forth, and if everybody's packing 15 to 20 removal spells or interaction spells, there's just a lot of stuff that can happen. So I've been having fun in the games that I play. Like there, there's a lot more gamesmanship and trying to figure out kind of, can I bait out a counterspell? Can I wait for somebody else to blow their counterspell? Should I like oftentimes like having a Thrastimna deck going ahead of me is just fine because I can usually just wait and try to sneak in behind them, like try to go off second, which is fine. So I've been having fun kind of with that little chess match in your head of like, how can I use these fast 4-color decks kind of to my advantage? Where if you have a more control-y deck in your pod, like Teferi or something like that, you can really like work those two decks off of each other and just sort of find the gap to kind of slip in your win.
Yeah, like make them try to burn their counter spells on each other, so that way you can kind of go in unabated.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's been something that I've been really enjoying with the way the meta's kind of shaped out. Is like, that whole kind of learning, like the increased amount of interaction has made me want to look at removal and kind of play around it, and I sandbag my own removal now when I see like another player with blue mana open or something, and it's really improved my own win percentage and like allows me to kind of like play the table a bit more. And yeah, it's been fun. But on the whole like partners thing, I'm really like kind of in the middle on it with you, just like with you and ASM on it, where it's like, yeah, there's a lot more Tymna and Thrasios around, but it's done, like it's made the format a lot more interactive. So like that's where that's the positives I draw from it. Like I don't know if I feel like there would need to be a ban on like Thrasios or Tymna, to make the format better, or something. But yeah.
Actually, so this isn't really related to ban talk or anything like that, but I remember there was like a Reddit thread about maybe 6 months to a year ago, and it was asking about which people thought was overwhelmingly better, or I don't know, or just which was better, like Thrasios or Tymna. And I think maybe the thread was about like which card is like from the last few sets or whatever is like
the most impactful,
being played a lot. And I remember like overwhelmingly Thrasios and Tymna were like the most talked about ones. And then between those two, people were overwhelmingly in favor of Thrasios being the lot stronger of the pair. But how do you guys feel about that now? Do you guys think Thrasios is like the key card? Because I kind of feel like it's actually Tymna now. Like, I mean, back then I also thought it was Tymna, but now I feel even more convinced that it is Tymna.
It's more of like Tymna getting partnered with green and blue is more the problem with Tymna. I think.
Yeah. I guess there's no other bleeding blue. Is there another blue and green partner?
There's Kydeel.
There isn't, right? Oh yeah, and there's Kydeel.
I think if Tymna was only able to be partnered with like one other color, like if it was like Abzan or Esper, or Mardu or something like that, like she'd be fine. But her being paired with, green and blue is kind of like the overkill for her. Or being paired with just two.
So I guess
colors,
let's put it this way: if Thrasios was blue green with no abilities and he's just the same cost as he is now, do you think those decks would still be good?
They wouldn't be nearly as good because it's the infinite mana outlet. So when I was talking about this question with some people in the mentor group, I was kind of surprised to hear so many people saying that Tymna was the stronger of the two. But I think that comes from the fact that Thrasios doesn't usually show up until the end, but having it there as the outlet is so important because it makes all your infinite mana 2-card combos into win cons. But in the course of a game, what you actually see on the table and what's beating you up is Timna. So it's kind of like it's a weird thing, like which one's more powerful. Where well, you almost never even see Thrasios until the end,
He's really
except as like a chump blocker. But still, having it there as the outlet is so important. I think it would change so many decks because then like
I mean, but also think about this: a lot of top decks on the ladder that are using Thras and Tymna aren't actually really using Thrasios. Like, Sick Robots list doesn't actually use Thrasios as an outlet. Like,
that's true.
You just
That's
get
true.
Hulk. And same with Hulk Weaver doesn't really. I mean, you have the Bomberman combo, but like your Hulk combo doesn't actually use.
No,
Thrasios.
but there's like all the Isochron dramatic reversal combos, all the Bomberman combos. Those all go through.
Thrasios.
And Paradox Top Key for some of the like the Stormier decks.
Yeah, but I personally think that the ones that also take advantage, the ones that are like more artifact based and just use the use Isochron Scepter with Thrasios, while they are strong, I feel like the resiliency from the ones that also utilize Tymna tend to like seriously like grind out the game like an insane amount.
I mean, there's no doubt they're both super powerful. Which of the two is stronger? I don't know. I mean, it depends on how much weight you give to colors and all the supporting 99 versus the commander itself. Obviously, in terms of impacting the game before the end, Tymna's way stronger, way stronger. But in terms of making a functional deck, Thrasios is pretty damn strong.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and then to kind of shift over to some of the other partners, we also have seen like other combinations of people trying to make other partners work. Right now, like there's some Tymna Crown lists, which are very control heavy, and we also have Thrasios Vile Smasher lists, which there's a couple of different variants on them, and
I haven't seen that around too much, actually. It's been a little while since I've seen one, but mainly the ones I've seen are the Spice Brew Divergent transformations.
Oh, yeah. I'll talk about that at some later episode. There's also a spicy version that has a Flash Hulk package where you get
Lightning Druid.
No, I'm not talking. I'm actually talking about the one where it's like a Reckless Fireweaver, and the other one that soul bonds to it.
Oh,
Curious.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
so I forget the name of the two cards, but you get the two cards, and one of them soul bonds the other one or something, and then at that point, anytime you cast a non-creature spell, it pings 3 of your opponents, and you draw 3 cards. So it's like a storm engine, basically.
Interesting.
So for people who think that we don't brew new decks in CDH, we do, but they just all use the same cards for the most part, except for like 3 cards that are different.
Pretty much.
No, I'm joking, but there are a lot of different Hulk brews that use interesting Hulk packages. And
all right, so I think that about wraps it up.
Yeah, and we didn't really talk too much at the beginning, but kind of the overarching goal was just sort of, I mean, us three tend to see a lot of stuff that happens kind of in the online meta, and decks get brewed very fast, they get rejected very fast, because it's all done on the Discord. So the goal of this podcast is really for the people that don't waste as much time as we do in the Discord, to just sort of give a snapshot of kind of our impressions of some of the newer decks and our impressions of some of the older decks. So that'll probably remain the focus of the podcast. But we went through a bunch today, so we probably wouldn't want to touch on those topics again unless something has changed, right? So once there gets to be 2 or 3 more new decks, or if we notice kind of changes in performance or whatever, that would be the time to really fire it up again and talk to you guys more about that.
Yeah, I think one thing is that there's like a perception on the subreddit that not a lot of new decks get made in CDH, but it's more like a lot of stuff gets brewed, but not most of it doesn't make it to the Reddit because they get rejected
it's
very
a good
quickly.
filter.
Yeah, people test them and they just don't perform well, and then they just the ones that end up being polished or popular end up on actually make it their way all the way to the subreddit. Like we've probably talked about 3 or 4 decks that probably most people haven't really heard about today.
Right.
All right, everybody. So I guess that about closes it out. So thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you.
We'll see you guys next time.